A Soviet defector, a couple of years later, makes this statement, that the world had come frighteningly close to the nuclear abyss. As a matter of fact, in Herring's judgment, there's only one moment in American history when the United States is closer. Cuban Missile Crisis. Cuban Missile Crisis. Then this is what he says. So, I mean, so you see how differently these two historians approach the issue of Able Archer. Where's the, does Reagan deserve credit? Does Reagan deserve criticism for what he's done? And it seems to me that this is, in a simplified form, I admit, this is indicative of the interpretive circumstances, interpretive situation that you confront when it comes to presenting something about Reagan, Gorbachev, and the end of the Cold War in your classes. Whether you're doing it now or whether you're going to do it in the future. And so with that background, I'd like to move into the next part of my presentation, which is going to be looking at Reagan, Gorbachev, and some political cartoons from the era as a way of getting at some of this material. But before we go on, any questions other than how to turn off a cell phone, or make it stop ringing? But
sir, when they interpret how Reagan, the land in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Do you think it's different for people who lived through the Cold War versus people who didn't live through the Cold War? I mean, if you grew up and people were putting in bomb shelters every time you built a house, you have a different appreciation or whatever for the end of the Cold War, and does that impact then how do you, are you looking for somebody to say, hey, you're the savior, you saved us from the Cold War? Or?
That's interesting. My initial response would be to say that isn't key, because I think a lot of people who lived through that experience are on both sides or either side of this divide. I don't think that becomes, in my judgment, at least my quick judgment, it doesn't become a key variable that distinguishes a John Lewis Gaddis from a George Herring. Let me twist it around another way. It may well be that given the extent to which Reagan ends his presidency on a high note, and if you look at the very end of the timeline, you'll see that he has the highest approval rating of any president leaving office since Franklin Roosevelt. I think that has had an awful lot to do with our students and maybe the larger society beginning with a very positive impression of Ronald Reagan and what he did. I think it's probably more ideological than experiential. At least that's how I'd argue it right away from you. Obviously you would argue that having lived through that, but I think maybe it depends on how you reacted to all of that. And I'll be very frank with you. I'm with Herring. So that's where I do come down on Herring's side here. And I did live through all of those things. But another question?
You have to do a lot with your political leanings too. I mean, if you're a hardcore Republican, you're going to think that Reagan was wonderful, and if you're a Democrat, you're going to look at it in a different point of view.
Well, that's what when I say ideology, that really and you caught that. Yeah, that's kind of code for saying that at least the predominant stances of the political parties. It's not as thoroughgoing, as you know, nothing in history ever is. You can find in the Democratic Party some people who are quite hawkish back in the 1980s. and some in the Republican Party who are distressed, if not appalled, by Reagan's early emphasis on this heavy rhetoric. Within his own administration, Weinberger at Defense and George Shultz in State are at loggerheads with one